I found a family portrait that laid about my identity, Reddit stories. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I've come to believe it can also hide 1,000 secrets. There's a photo hanging above my parents' fireplace that everyone always admired. 3 kids grinning in summer clothes, arms slung over each other like best friends. Our parents standing behind us with proud eyes and tight smiles. That photo was taken on a July afternoon, just before the truth began to rot beneath our feet like the floorboards in the attic. I used to stare at it for hours, trying to convince myself that it captured something real. But the older I got, the more I started to see what wasn't there. The way my sister's smile was slightly too wide, the way my brother's hand wasn't quite touching mine. And my parents. God, those eyes weren't proud. They were terrified. They were waiting, watching, praying that the day wouldn't come when it all unraveled. But it did, and I was the one who pulled the first thread. It started with a box. An old, damaged thing I found buried behind Christmas decorations in the attic after my mother had asked me to search for the missing angel ornament. We hadn't used it in years, not since my grandmother died, but Mom suddenly insisted that this year we had to find it. I think now she was trying to keep me out of that attic for good, to keep me from what I didn't even know was waiting for me in the shadows of that slanted ceiling. I never found the angel, but I found the box, and inside were things that made no sense. Photos I had never seen, labeled with names I didn't recognize. A birth certificate with the name, Hannah Lynn Carter, printed in faded ink. The date of birth was 1 week before mine. That couldn't be right. There was only one daughter in our family. Me. The weird thing was, Hannah looked like me. Not just similar, identical. Same hair, same shape of face, same freckle beneath the left eye. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten something. A childhood friend, a cousin, but none of it made sense. The deeper I dug into that box, the worse it got. Hospital papers with both my mom's and Hannah's names listed. A withdrawal form from kindergarten signed by my dad. And tucked at the bottom, a folded newspaper clipping that stopped my breath cold. Local toddler missing from daycare, a Hannah Carter, age 4 port. Dated just 5 days before my own 4th birthday. I took the box downstairs. My mom was setting the table, humming a tune that now makes my stomach twist when I hear it. I remember the moment she looked up and saw what I was carrying. The blood drained from her face. She dropped a plate. It shattered on the tile. And then, like some twisted movie scene, she sat down on the floor in silence. Didn't speak, didn't cry, just sat. My dad came in next. One look at the mess and he knew. He looked at her, not me. "I told you this would happen," he said. His voice was flat. Angry, but not surprised. Like he'd rehearsed it 100 times in his head. I spent the next 3 hours in the garage, door locked, heart pounding like it wanted to claw out of my chest. I went through everything again. That name, Hannah Carter, it wasn't going away. It felt like it was crawling inside me, rewriting me. I took out my own birth certificate, the one stored in my desk drawer, and stared at it until the words blurred. Melissa Carter? It read. But the ink looked newer than the rest of the paper. That night, I slept with the lights on. I dreamt of running through a hallway of mirrors, each one showing me a different version of myself. Some older, some younger, some with bruises on their arms or blood on their hands. The next morning, my parents sat me down. No coffee, no distractions, just 3 of us at the table. My mother's voice trembled when she spoke. "You were adopted," she said, and then corrected herself. "No, not exactly adopted. You were given to us." I couldn't speak. I felt like I had swallowed glass. My father picked up the thread. "Your real parents, they were in trouble. They asked us to keep you safe." It was all unofficial. No lawyers, no agencies. Just desperate people making desperate choices. My thoughts spiraled. So who were my real parents? Were they criminals? Dead? Still out there? And then she said it. "Your name was Hannah?" It hit me like a freight train. All those years I thought I was Melissa, the middle child, the shy one with the art journal and the fear of loud noises. But somewhere deep in my bones, something began to resonate with that name. Hannah. Like an echo I hadn't heard in years, finally finding its way back to me. I didn't ask many questions that day. I couldn't. But I began to change. I stopped calling them Mom and Dad. Not out loud, at least. In my head, I called them the Carters. It made me feel safer, more in control. I became obsessed with the idea of finding my real parents. I didn't even know why. Maybe I thought they'd explain something. Why I was afraid of water, but had no memory of drowning. Why I sometimes woke up sobbing from dreams I couldn't describe. Why I felt so deeply out of place in every photo we ever took as a family. I hired a private investigator with the money I had saved for college. I told my parents it was for a gap year exploration project. They didn't ask. Maybe they already knew what I was doing. Or maybe they just didn't want to know. The investigator worked fast. Within 3 weeks, he found an old police report linking a woman named Laura Bellamy to the missing Hannah Carter case. She had been listed as a person of interest, later cleared. But what stuck out was her address, only 2 towns over. That same night, I drove out there. I didn't knock on the door. I sat in my car for hours, staring at the porch light, wondering what I would even say. "Hi, I think I'm your kidnapped daughter." Eventually, the lights went off. I went home, but I kept going back, every night for a week, until finally the front door opened before I even got out of the car. A woman stood there. Middle-aged, tired eyes. She looked right at me, not through me. At me. And then she said something I'll never forget. "I was wondering how long it would take for you to find me." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. She walked to my window and gently tapped. I rolled it down. She looked me over like she was memorizing my face. "You're taller than I thought you'd be," she whispered. But you look just like your sister." The sister. The next hour felt like a fever dream. Her name was Laura, and she told me a story that made the Carters' version sound like a bedtime tale. According to her, I wasn't just a missing girl. I was a twin. Hannah and Harper Bellamy, born minutes apart. Harper died in a daycare fire when she was 4. Or at least that's what the authorities were told. But Laura swore the fire wasn't an accident. She claimed someone had set it deliberately, and that someone had taken Hannah in the chaos. That someone was my father. Not the man I'd known as my father, but my biological one. A man she had been hiding from for years. "He wanted to keep you," she said. "Not out of love, out of spite." I didn't know what to believe. None of it made sense. And yet, in her house on the mantel was a photo that made my knees give out. 2 girls, barely toddlers. One with a freckle beneath her left eye, the other without, both with the same crooked smile. The photo was dated 2005, 2 years before my official birthday. I slept in my car that night. I couldn't go home, not to the Carters, not to Laura. I just needed space. But the next morning, when I tried to go back to ask more questions, the house was empty, abandoned, like no one had lived there in years. The neighbors said it had been vacant since 2017. I checked the police reports again. There was no Laura Bellamy listed as a living resident. No current address, no death record, nothing. Just gone, like she never existed, like I never did. I wish I could tell you I left it alone after that. That I went home, burned the photos, and convinced myself I had imagined it all. That Laura was a ghost of grief, or a figment of my own unraveling identity. But that's not how my mind works. Once a crack forms, I can't stop picking at it until the whole thing falls apart. That night, when I stared up at the same family portrait above the fireplace, it felt different. Like it had eyes. Like it had always been watching me, not the other way around. I couldn't look at it without feeling like an imposter. Melissa Carter, Hannah Carter, Harper Bellamy. Who was I? The next day I called the private investigator again. This time with a new mission. I wanted him to dig into my own records. Not just birth certificates or hospital records. I wanted everything. Surveillance footage, enrollment forms, anyone who had seen me before age 5. I also asked him to look into Laura Bellamy again. I didn't tell him about the abandoned house or the photo that vanished into memory like smoke. I knew how that would sound, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, had erased her after she spoke to me, like she broke a rule by revealing too much. While he worked, I returned to the attic. The angel ornament was still missing, but I didn't care anymore. I moved aside every box, every forgotten bin, looking for something, anything, connected to Hannah or Harper or Laura. I should have known the Carters hadn't left everything in that one box. The real truth was buried deeper. Behind the insulation near the far wall, I found a wooden panel that was loose. When I pried it open, a thin folder slid out from the gap in the beams. Inside it were faded photographs, notes scribbled in tight, almost manic handwriting, and several Polaroids that made my stomach twist. One showed me at what must have been 3 years old, standing on a swing set I didn't recognize. Another showed me asleep in a bed with strange wallpaper behind me. Bright yellow ducks. But it wasn't me. It was the same girl from the other photo. Same face, same freckle, different pajamas. And the date printed in the corner was 3 days after the day I supposedly entered the Carters' lives. That girl was labeled Harperba. I stared at it for what felt like hours. If I was Hannah and Harper had died in the fire, then who was this girl? Was the narrative all wrong? Had Harper survived instead? Or was I Harper and Hannah was the one who had vanished? My memories offered no clarity. In fact, the more I tried to remember my earliest years, the fuzzier they became. I had flashes, smells of smoke, a nursery song I didn't recognize, someone screaming my name. But it was never Melissa. It was always a name shouted in panic, Harper. I took the folder and hid it beneath the floorboard in my room, not trusting the attic anymore, or the Carters, or even my own reflection. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening for footsteps, for hushed conversations, but the house was silent, too silent, like it was holding its breath. A week later, the investigator called me back. He sounded off. Rushed, he said he'd found something odd. My school enrollment began abruptly in the middle of the year. No preschool records, no daycare trail. The paper trail before age 5 was full of holes. More importantly, my listed vaccination records were inconsistent with local health databases. It was as if I'd appeared out of thin air. And there was one more thing. He found a sealed juvenile case attached to the name, Harper Bellamy. But it was locked. Classified. He'd need court authorization to open it, which meant whatever was inside, someone had worked hard to bury. I asked him to keep digging. That was the last time we spoke. The next day, I found his office locked, windows shuttered. For lease sign hung on the door. His number was disconnected. No forwarding address. Just like Laura. Just like the truth. I was losing my mind. Desperate, I confronted the Carters. Not calmly. Not with questions. I slammed the folder on the kitchen table and demanded to know everything. No more lies. My mother began to cry before I even opened it. My father stood with his arms crossed, jaw clenched like a soldier in formation. "This isn't what you think," he said. "No," I spat. "It's exactly what I think. You stole me." "No one stole you," he growled. "You were left." "She left you? Who? Who?" He didn't answer. My mother broke then. She sobbed so hard she couldn't breathe. Between gasps, she choked out a name, Mira. I froze. That name hadn't come up before. Not Laura, not Hannah, not Harper. Mira. "She wasn't your mother," my mom said. "She was your keeper. Part of a program. You were part of something we didn't understand." I felt like the room tipped sideways. What program? They said it was for children who didn't have families. Experimental parenting. Testing long-term identity resilience. But we found out it wasn't that. They were studying you, watching, tracking development, behavior, control. And then the fire happened. She ran. She took you. And we took you from her. Not because we wanted to. Because someone had to. But my mouth went dry. Someone had to take me from her. From Mira. She nodded slowly. "She wasn't your mother." "Not really. You had no mother. You were born in a lab, Hannah, or Harper, or whatever they called you. We tried to raise you like a real daughter, but we were always waiting, always afraid they'd come back. I staggered out the door and didn't stop running until I reached the old woods behind our house. There was a creek we used to play by as kids. I used to pretend it held messages in the water, secrets whispered by the current. That day, it felt more like an accusation, like it had known all along. I sat there for hours, thinking, remembering. And then I went back to the attic. There had to be more, something I missed. The folder, the box, the cracks in the beams. I tore through the insulation, pulling up every loose panel until I found a latch, one I had never noticed before. A hidden compartment behind the chimney brick. Inside was a small safe. Combination lock. No key, I guessed. Birthdays, names, random numbers. Then I tried the date on the newspaper clipping. The day Hannah went missing. Click, the door creaked open. Inside were tapes, actual VHS tapes, labeled only with numbers. I found the old player in the basement and fed one in. It showed a room, stereo, white walls, two little girls playing with wooden blocks. One of them was me. The other looked just like me. Identical. Twins. But the way they played wasn't normal. Every few minutes, a voice would come over the intercom. Harper, choose a block. No, Hannah, knock it down. Obediently, we followed, over and over. Build. Knock. Build. Then the lights in the room dimmed, and I watched the tape zoom in on Harper. She began to cry. The voice repeated the same command, over and over. Harper, knock it down. But she wouldn't. She just stared at Hannah. The screen cut to black. The next tape was worse. They made us fight. I don't remember it, but I watched it happen. A 6-year-old version of me shoved another girl into a corner, while a voice congratulated us from behind the camera. Excellent instinct. Strong dominance. And at the end of the tape, they pulled one girl away, the one who had lost. I don't know which one I was. Hannah, Harper, or neither. Just an experiment wearing a name someone chose for me. That night, I slept on the floor of the attic with the tapes piled around me. They felt like the only pieces of myself I could trust. In the morning, the Carters were gone. No note. No phone call. Just gone. Only the portrait remained, still hanging above the fireplace, still lying. The day after the Carters disappeared, I walked through our empty house like a trespasser in my own life. Their clothes were gone, drawers emptied, photo frames turned face down as if someone had tried to erase not just themselves, but the idea that they'd ever existed. But the portrait was still there. That damn picture above the fireplace, always grinning down at me with its carefully staged lie. I stared at it for a long time, tracing every smile, every shadow, trying to find proof that I had once belonged here. But I didn't. I never had. Not as Hannah, not as Harper, and definitely not as Melissa. I spent that week in silence. No school, no texts, no contact with the outside world. I didn't eat much, didn't sleep. My time was spent watching the tapes one by one, documenting every detail in a spiral notebook I found in the kitchen drawer. Each tape was a window into a world I had no memory of, but that I instinctively recognized. Cold rooms, identical children, puzzles, games, commands spoken through static-filled speakers. Some of the children obeyed, some hesitated, and some, those who refused, were never seen again on the next tape. My name was spoken occasionally. Not always the same one. Sometimes it was subject non, sometimes Harper. Once or twice I heard echo. It chilled me more than any of the others. Echo, like something repeated. A copy. A shadow. It was on the 10th tape that I saw something that truly broke whatever was left of my belief in the world as I knew it. A recording from what looked like an observation room. The walls were lined with monitors, and behind them sat people in white coats. A man in the foreground flipped through a clipboard, reading aloud a summary. Subject 9 displays strong cognitive adaptation and social mimicry. Remains unaware of replication status, physical integrity, stable. Emotional responsiveness, selectively heightened. Reprogramming phase scheduled for Q3. Behavioral correction moderate, a replication status. The word echoed. That night I tore my notebook to shreds. I didn't want to remember any of it anymore. But it was too late. I had already memorized every frame, every word. I couldn't unsee the girl who looked like me in a hospital gown, curled up in a padded room. I couldn't unhear the word reprogramming. And I couldn't stop asking myself the question that now followed me like a ghost. What if I wasn't even born? What if I was built? The next morning, I found the letter. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. But there it was, lying on the kitchen table, addressed in neat block letters. A Molosov? Riedi Alaman. Inside was a single page typed. No signature. You've done well to get this far. That means the memory suppression degraded faster than projected. They won't be happy, but there's still time. The program is compromised. The others are waking up too. You need to find the safe house. Use the pendant. It contains the coordinates. Destroy the tapes, leave the portrait. No map, no instructions, just that. I had no idea what pendant it meant until I looked again at the portrait. Not the photo, but the frame. Ornate, old, gold, painted wood. At the bottom right corner, there was a small carved indentation I'd never noticed. I dug my fingers under it and pried until the wood creaked, and something small and cold slid into my hand. It was a locket. I opened it. Inside was a tiny circuit board. No photos, no names. Just a chip etched with numbers. I knew someone who could decode it. Back in high school, I'd had a brief thing with a boy named Leo. Nerdy, paranoid, brilliant. He once told me he'd built a device to scan RFID chips because he didn't trust his bus pass. We hadn't spoken in months, but I still had his number. I texted him a photo of the chip and asked if he could tell me what it was. He replied 5 minutes later, "Where did you get this? Long story. Can you read it?" "Yeah, bring it to me." Tonight, his apartment was cluttered, just like I remembered. Wires snaking across the floor, old monitors stacked like towers, blinking in green and blue. He didn't ask questions when I handed him the locket. He just plugged it into a strange-looking reader and began typing. After a few moments, he frowned. "This thing's encrypted, like high-level defense contractor encrypted. But it's not impossible." 10 minutes later, he cracked it. A string of numbers scrolled across the screen, followed by coordinates and a date 42.7761 nen, 8/171/15/300 AM. "Where is that?" I asked. "Lawrence, Massachusetts, middle of nowhere." I nodded, heart racing. "Thanks." He grabbed my arm before I could leave. "Hey, be careful, all right? Whatever this is, it's not just old tech. It's active. This chip pinged 3 different frequencies when I accessed it. Someone might know you opened it. I left anyway." The closer I got to April 15, the worse everything became. I started noticing vans parked too long on my street. Strangers in stores watching me a beat too long. My phone glitched constantly. Calls dropped. Apps closed themselves. Even Leo stopped answering. His number went dead. I packed a bag, clothes, food, the locket, my notebook, or what was left of it. I printed screenshots from the tapes before deleting them, just in case someone tried to retrieve them remotely. On April 14, I drove through the night. Lawrence was quiet, too quiet. The coordinates led to an abandoned textile factory, half collapsed. Surrounded by rusted fencing and broken windows, I waited outside until 2:59 a.m., heart pounding like a war drum. Then, at exactly 300, a floodlight blinked on. Someone was there. A figure appeared in the doorway. They wore black, face hidden beneath a hood, but I recognized the voice as soon as they spoke. "I didn't think you'd come." It was Laura, or whoever had claimed to be Laura. She led me inside wordlessly. The factory had been repurposed. Computers lined the walls, humming softly. A few others moved in the shadows, quiet and tense. All of them looked like me. Not exactly, but similar. Same eyes, same jawline. Like we were different drafts of the same person. Laura sat me down. "Do you remember what they did?" "No." Unsurprised. They took memories, reprogrammed us. Each of us got a new name, a new place, a fake past. But it never holds. Eventually, the truth leaks through. "What are we?" I asked. She smiled, bitter. "We're echoes, not clones, not robots. Human enough, but born in loops. Memories spliced together. Personalities stitched from algorithms. We were never meant to know, just meant to live and fail. They watched us to see which versions survived best. I couldn't breathe. So the Carters were handlers, maybe believer victims. Doesn't matter, they kept you running. But now the trial is over. I looked at the others, silent, waiting. What now? She handed me a piece of paper. On it, a list of names. All the children from the tapes. Because the ones who didn't survive, they weren't failures. They were deleted, and they're coming to delete us too. Then the lights went out. Gunfire. Screams. And the experiment began again. The first bullet struck the computer tower next to me, sending a cascade of sparks across the room like fireworks from hell. I didn't have time to scream. I dove to the ground, crawling behind a steel table as gunfire erupted from the shadows. The factory filled with the deafening roar of war. Metal clanging, glass shattering, bodies dropping. I glimpsed one of the girls, another echo, running toward a side door before a flash of light swallowed her. She didn't make a sound as she fell, just vanished, like she had never been real at all. Laura, or the woman who claimed to be her, grabbed my wrist, yanking me to my feet. The side stairs, Movi. I didn't hesitate. I followed her through the maze of hallways, heart pounding so hard it made my vision shake. The factory was crumbling around us, dust falling from the ceiling with every shot. Somewhere behind me, someone was calling names. Not orders names. Echo 12. Return for extraction. But no one returned. Laura pulled open a rusted door that led to a stairwell lit only by the distant flicker of flames. We scrambled up the steps two at a time, the echoes of footsteps, not ours, following behind. How did they find us? I shouted. They always find us, she hissed. It's the final phase. They let you get just far enough, then wipe the slate clean. But not this time. At the top of the stairs was a hatch. She shoved it open, revealing the night sky and the roof. A graveyard of old satellite dishes and water tanks. Cold air hit my face like a slap. We ran to the far side where a black SUV waited, engine rumbling. A man stepped out, face obscured by a mask. He opened the door without a word. We don't have time to vet him, Laura said, eyes wild. Either we get in or we die. So we got in. The vehicle sped off before the door was even closed. Through the back window, I saw the factory light up in orange and red. An explosion swallowed the building whole. Every screen, every echo, every piece of what I had just started to understand. Gone. Laura didn't speak for miles. The masked man drove with surgical calm, weaving through back roads like he knew every twist of the earth. I sat in silence, heart heavy with questions that no longer had safe answers. Where are we going? I finally asked. To the Ark, she said. The last safe server. That made no sense. Server? She turned to me then, her face hard but tired. You don't think this is about your body, do you? They don't care about that. They care about data. Your memories, your reactions, your decisions under pressure, your empathy, your rage. You are a moving experiment in adaptive emotional programming. And that, she tapped my temple, that's what they want back. I felt sick. So this isn't about deleting me. It's about resetting you, erasing everything that makes you different. They call it the deletion protocol. We call it the silence. I leaned back, closing my eyes, willing it all to be a dream. A sick, delusional dream, but I still felt the heat of the explosion. The phantom taste of smoke. The locket pressed against my chest. Why did you say not this time? I asked. She hesitated. Because one of us made it out before. Echo 0. The original. She got past them, vanished. And we think she left something behind. Something that can shut it all down. Code that severs the uplink? I didn't understand half of what she was saying, but I clung to the idea like a lifeline. An original. Someone who survived. Someone who broke the cycle. The Ark turned out to be a bunker built beneath an old observatory hidden deep in the forest near the Vermont border. The masked man left us at the tree line, disappearing as quietly as he had arrived. We descended a staircase carved into stone, down into the darkness until we reached a steel door. Laura punched in a code. The door hissed open. Inside was a chamber humming with electricity. Server racks glowed in dim blue light. Monitors displayed scrambled maps and strings of code that meant nothing to me. People moved between stations. Only a handful of them, all wearing expressions that said they hadn't slept in days. One of them looked up, a woman with short silver hair and eyes that scanned me like a barcode. "You brought 9. She triggered the locket, Laura said. "Thee came for her faster than we thought." The woman nodded once. "Good. She might be the last." They brought me to a room filled with old hard drives and optical readers. Laura handed me a tablet. On it was a list of coordinates, locations marked in red, all with dates. "These are the other Echo collapse points," she said. Each one was a test site, all burned, except one. The location was somewhere in Canada, a remote town named Coldwater. "They say Echo Zero left something there," she explained. "A memory cache, one that holds the original protocols. If we get there first, we can end the whole cycle. Sever the neural mapping network." "How?" "By broadcasting her last memory." I blinked. "A memory?" She nodded. Echo Zero lived through the entire program, from birth to awakening, and she remembered everything. They tried to erase it, but she encoded it inside a neural echo, a kind of cognitive fingerprint. If we find it and push it to the network, it'll poison their code. Corrupt it. Crash the experiment chain. It sounded impossible. Sci-fi. Ridiculous. But I had seen myself on a tape where I didn't remember being. I had watched girls who looked like me disappear into shadows. So who was I to say what was real anymore? "I'll go," I said. Laura grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. "Then you'd better run fast, because they're already tracking the signal from your locket." We left that night in an unmarked truck, driving through back roads and border crossings, hiding from satellites and patrols. Along the way, I learned the truth about what I was: not a clone, not a robot, but not quite born either. "Think of yourself like a melody," Laura said once as we camped near a frozen lake. "You're made from pieces of a dozen other songs, mixed, edited, refined, played again and again to see which version makes people cry the most. That's why you dream in fragments. That's why your fears don't make sense. You're the result of 1,000 compositions." I didn't respond, because I knew she was right. Coldwater appeared 3 days later, a ghost town swallowed by snow. No lights, no footprints, just silence thick as ash. We found the place from the map, a house at the end of a dead road, half buried in ice. Inside was a basement, untouched. And in the center of the room, under a tarp, was a metal chair with restraints. Cameras mounted on all 4 walls. A speaker on the ceiling. "This is where she remembered," Laura whispered. "Where she screamed the truth until it broke her." I approached the chair, hands trembling. On the seat was a small drive, wrapped in cloth. I held it up. It felt warm. Laura took it from me. "If this is real, if the memory is still intact, then you've just found the end of the story." But as she plugged it into her reader, something changed. The house lights flickered. Her screen flashed red. "UPIK detected, or itariva vioyen ambiuv." I didn't move. Neither did she. "We have to run," I said. But Laura just stared at the screen. "No. You have to run. I'll buy you time." I tried to argue, but she shoved the drive into my pocket and pulled a switchblade from her coat. "Go." "Now?" I turned and ran. Out the door, into the snow. I didn't look back. Not even when the gunshots started. Not even when I heard her scream. I ran until my lungs gave out. Until the world turned black. And when I woke up, I wasn't in the snow anymore. I was in a white room, just like the tapes, just like the beginning. Only this time, I wasn't a child. And the voice on the speaker said, "Echo 9, welcome back." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. When I opened my eyes in that blinding white room, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling as if it could somehow whisper the answers I didn't want to hear. The sterile air smelled like bleach and metal. The walls glowed faintly, and the corners had no seams, as if the entire room had been poured from one impossible material. There were no windows, no clocks, Just the low hum of electricity and the software of unseen machines breathing around me. I was back where I started, or maybe where I had always been. Each 09, the voice repeated, no longer mechanical but disturbingly calm. Human, even. Familiar. Do you remember who you are? The room was silent for a moment, as if waiting for my answer. Then I whispered, Wes. But I lied, because I didn't know anymore. Was I Hannah? Harper? Melissa? Or just a construct wearing someone else's tragedy like a second skin? The wall across from me shimmered, then opened like sliding glass, revealing a corridor of the same endless white. I sat up slowly, half expecting restraints, but there were none. No IVs, no bruises, just my clothes from before, still dusty from the snow, still soaked with Laura's blood. I walked into the corridor barefoot, the floor cool beneath me, and followed the sound of the voice as it guided me through the maze. You've made significant progress, it said. Cognitive resilience has exceeded prior benchmarks. Emotional synapses remain volatile, but self-preservation instincts are fully operational. You are now in Phase 6 integration. Integration of what? The pieces of myself, the data they'd stolen, the memories they kept feeding me through dreams like poison candy. I passed a room on my left. Through the glass, I saw a little girl, 6 or 7, coloring on the floor. Her hair was the same shade as mine, the same freckle. She looked up eyes wide, but didn't speak. I kept walking. Next room, an older version, maybe 14, braces, band shirt, headphones over one ear, humming something I couldn't hear. She didn't look at me. Next, me at 18, staring blankly at a monitor with static, fingers twitching like they were playing piano, all of them. Snapshots, saved states. They were Echo 9 too. Versions of me frozen in time like backup files. You're not the first iteration to reach this level, the voice said again, softer now. Closer. But you are the most stable. A stable. That was what I had become. A good little program that didn't crash when faced with the truth. I reached a circular chamber at the end of the hallway. Inside was a single chair and a wall of glass that reflected my image too perfectly. But when I stepped closer, the reflection changed. It didn't mimic me. It studied me, tilted its head when I didn't, blinked late. And then it spoke. You're ready to see me? The glass dissolved. Behind it sat a woman who could have been my twin 20 years from now. Same eyes, same shape of face, but colder, wiser. Like time hadn't aged her, it had carved her. She smiled faintly. Achozero, she said. Or as I used to be known, Mira. I didn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing. She stood and walked around the console, her steps deliberate. I remember when I sat where you're standing, drenched in questions, blinded by rage, hoping I was a person, fearing I wasn't. What am I? I choked out. She stopped in front of me. You are a story, written in neural pathways, printed on borrowed genes, coded to feel, to fail, to grow. You are what they call the adaptive cognitive experiment, ACE. You weren't born, you were compiled. I stepped back. No. I'm real. I've loved. I remember pain, fear, loss. That's what makes you real, she said gently, but not natural. I wanted to punch her, to run. But I stood frozen. So all this, the Carters, Laura, cold water, it was all designed. Parts of it. They gave you some freedom, enough to test free will. But they left variables, people, events, to steer you, to see how much chaos you could absorb before breaking. I laughed bitterly. And the portrait, that stupid, lying portrait above the fireplace. She smiled almost sadly. Oh, the portrait was the control. The one fixed memory in every scenario. A symbol of belonging. It anchored you. They wanted to see if you would notice it didn't fit. You did. That was your awakening. It hit me then. That moment I first questioned it. The crack that unraveled everything. The picture wasn't a comfort, it was a test. So what now? I whispered. You reboot me, wipe me, start over. She turned away, hands folded behind her back. You were meant to be deleted after Phase 5. The protocol activated when you reach cold water. Laura delayed them, but only barely. You're not supposed to be here? I made it, I said. That has to count for something. It does. She turned back and her eyes flickered, not with light, but with something else. Recognition. Grief. Which is why I'm giving you a choice. I didn't move. You can return to the world, she said. We'll rewrite what's left, implant a softer memory, find a new family. No more nightmares, no more questions, just peace. Ignorant, blissful peace. I waited. Or, she continued, you can finish what Laura started. Take the drive she died protecting. Upload the memory, my memory, into the uplink. Infect the experiment. Set the other echoes free. But you'll lose everything. Your sense of self, your tether to the world. You'll cease to be Echo 9. You'll become a virus. Will I die? I asked. You'll stop being you, but you'll save every version of you that comes after, and maybe even some who already passed. I stared at the console, at the tiny port glowing faintly. The choice pulsed before me like a heartbeat. Freedom or erasure, a new lie or the final truth. Then I reached into my pocket. The drive was still there, wrapped in cloth and blood. I placed it on the console. Mira didn't stop me. She just whispered, I hope you do better than I did. I slid it into the port. The room went dark. The monitors lit up. One by one, images flickered. Faces, memories, tapes, data streams. The sounds of laughter, screams, lullabies. A cascade of humanity, broken and beautiful. And then I saw her, a little girl in a yellow dress, singing softly to herself. Harper. I whispered. She looked up, smiled, and disappeared. The last thing I felt was warmth, like sunlight after winter. Then silence. Not absence, but freedom. There's a moment, just after drowning, when the world becomes eerily still. No struggle, no panic. Just quiet. That's what it felt like when I ceased to be Echo 9. The world didn't end, it exhaled. Time, memory, identity, those things unraveled like ribbon in slow water. But I didn't vanish. I dissolved. The upload initiated instantly. Mira's memory, her original, unfiltered truth, poured into the system like wildfire. I saw it all as it transmitted through me, through every neural thread I once called men. Her first moment in the program. Sterile light, latex hands, the name Mara assigned like a sticker. The dozens of simulations she endured. The iterations that failed. The ones that fought back. The ones that broke and never returned. The handlers that came and went. Some kind, some monstrous, some numb with guilt. I watched her fall in love once, with a boy who was also an eco. They gave him a name, Lucas. But his number was 11. He kissed her behind a water tank on the facility roof when they were 16 and whispered, I think I'm real when I'm with you. He was deleted 3 days later. That broke her. That made her. She stopped obeying after that, stopped pretending. And when the time came, she escaped. They thought she'd been destroyed in a failed transfer, but she had hidden her consciousness inside a corrupted test loop, buried it under layers of code labeled legacy redundancy. That's where I found it, where I became the transmission vessel, the final chord in a melody meant to overwrite a symphony of lies. When it was done, the silence returned. I didn't wake up in the White Room, or in the Carter's home, or the forest, or cold water, or anywhere my feet had ever touched. I woke up nowhere. But I existed, floating, watching, listening, not dead, not alive, but threaded through every version of what came next. And I saw them. One by one across the network, the echoes woke up. Children in lab chambers, blinking away dreams. Teenagers sitting in classrooms, suddenly aware that the numbers on their wristbands weren't just barcodes for lunch. Women and men in suburban homes, staring at family portraits that suddenly made no sense. All of them paused. All of them remembered. It was chaos and beauty and grief. Some screamed. Some ran. Some laughed hysterically. But they were free. And the system, the experiment, the cold machine that had orchestrated us all like puppets on invisible strings, it collapsed. Not with an explosion or alarms, but with static. Screens turned to snow. Cameras blinked off, doors unlocked, files wiped themselves clean, overwritten with strings of corrupted characters that spelled out fragments of who we were. And then the architects came. The ones who had built the program, who had watched behind walls of mirrored glass, scientists, investors, military men, tech CEOs who'd convinced themselves it was all for the future of humanity. But they tried to reboot. They tried to cover it up, but it was too late, because Mira's memory wasn't just uploaded to the Echo network, it was broadcast to the world. The truth, messy, brutal, undeniable, leaked into every corner of the internet. News outlets didn't believe it at first. Deepfake, they said. Fiction, a hoax. But then the Echoes began speaking, sharing their stories, showing their scars, lining up their identical faces for the world to see. There was no denying it anymore. We were real, and we were many. Somewhere in the aftermath, the world fractured. Laws were written, trials held. The corporations that funded the ACE program burned. Whistleblowers came forward. More secrets leaked. Some Echoes sued for personhood rights. Others disappeared, choosing to live quietly, to build new lives beyond the wreckage. And some, like me, lingered in the wires. I didn't return to a body. Not right away. Mira's sacrifice had overwritten too much of my neural map. I was no longer a stable self. I was memory residue, ghost code. A voice that sometimes whispered through radios, through cracked screens, through the minds of other Echoes still struggling to understand who they were. And then I chose. One day, years later, a girl named Kiera stumbled across a file buried deep in an old server scavenged from a facility in Arizona. She opened it, a flicker of static, then a voice. Mine. Do you know what a portrait lies about the most? I asked her. She flinched, but didn't close the screen. It lies about stillness, as if the people in it never moved, never changed, never broke or healed. It captures a lie that looks like love. But love isn't still, it's messy, shifting, real. Who are you? She typed. I was Echo 9. Was. No, I'm Choice. And you? She didn't answer, but I felt something shift. She clicked accept, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of skin again, the rush of breath, a pulse. I wasn't reborn, I was resumed. Not as a weapon, not as a test, but as a story, a warning passed from one mind to the next, each Echo writing their own ending. I live now in borrowed time, wearing the face of someone I'll never meet, helping others unravel the tangled nets that once held us. And I still remember the portrait. It hangs now in a museum somewhere, framed under glass. People stare at it, unaware of what it once hid. They call it the quiet family. But if you look closely, if you really look, you'll see the girl in the middle isn't smiling anymore. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe and like the video.